Have you ever wondered why the fat around your midsection seems so stubborn, so resistant to everything you've tried? You've reduced portions. You've increased your walking. You've perhaps even eliminated desserts, and yet that inner belt line remains unchanged. Here's what most conversations overlook. Belly fat is not a storage problem. It is a communication problem. It is a signal from your body that something deeper requires attention. Something that has very little to do with the number of calories on your plate and everything to do with how your liver, your hormones, and even your stress response have become locked in a pattern that works against you. What if the solution lies not in doing more, but in understanding something fundamental that has been hidden in plain sight? You are listening to the Longevity Library, where we archive the wisdom of healthy aging. The science of belly fat. Understanding metabolic health after 50. Introduction. Belly fat is one of the most common health concerns for individuals over 50. It is not simply a matter of appearance or clothing size. The fat that accumulates around the midsection, particularly deep within the abdomen, functions differently than fat stored elsewhere in the body. Understanding this distinction is essential for anyone seeking to improve their long-term health outcomes. This presentation examines the biological mechanisms behind belly fat storage, explains why conventional approaches often fail, and provides practical, evidence-based strategies for addressing this specific health concern. Understanding visceral fat. What makes belly fat different? The fat visible on the abdomen that can be pinched with the fingers is subcutaneous fat, located just beneath the skin. While this type of fat can be frustrating, it is not the primary concern for metabolic health. The more significant issue is visceral fat, also known as intra-abdominal fat, which accumulates deep within the abdominal cavity surrounding the internal organs. Visceral fat is biologically active tissue that produces inflammatory compounds and hormones that can disrupt normal metabolic function. Its location near the portal vein, which carries blood from the intestinal area to the liver, means that substances released from visceral fat have direct and immediate access to the liver. The liver connection. The liver plays a central role in the development of problematic belly fat. To understand why, it is helpful to consider the liver's unique position in metabolism. The liver weighs approximately 1/60th of total body weight. Yet it must process certain substances that no other organ can handle. When the liver becomes overwhelmed with substances it alone must process, it converts the excess energy into fat. This fat first accumulates within the liver itself, a condition known as fatty liver, and then begins to accumulate in the surrounding visceral area. This is why fatty liver and visible belly fat so often occur together. The primary drivers of visceral fat accumulation: fructose and the liver. Among dietary components, fructose has a unique and problematic relationship with the liver. Unlike glucose, which can be metabolized by virtually every cell in the body, fructose must be processed almost entirely by the liver. When fructose is consumed in moderate amounts, the liver can handle it without difficulty. When consumed in large quantities, however, the liver becomes overwhelmed. The process works as follows. When fructose enters the liver, it is rapidly converted into fat through a process called de novo lipogenesis, which means making new fat. This fat accumulates in the liver, leading to fatty liver disease. Once the liver's storage capacity is exceeded, fat begins to accumulate in the visceral area. This mechanism explains why non-alcoholic fatty liver disease has become so prevalent. It is not caused by alcohol consumption, but by dietary fructose, primarily from added sugars. Comparing sugar sources. Table sugar, or sucrose, consists of equal parts glucose and fructose. High fructose corn syrup typically contains approximately 55% fructose and 45% glucose, making it slightly more concentrated in fructose than regular sugar. When considering fruit consumption, Context matters significantly. Fruits contain fructose, but the concentration varies. Apples and pears are among the highest, with approximately 7% of their total weight being pure fructose. Watermelon has a lower percentage of fructose by weight, but because it is easy to consume large quantities, the total fructose load can accumulate quickly. A medium apple contains approximately 12 grams of fructose. A pound of watermelon contains approximately 18 grams of fructose. Consuming both in a single day would provide approximately 30 grams of fructose, equivalent to the fructose content in a 20-ounce soda sweetened with high fructose corn syrup. For individuals with healthy livers and normal insulin sensitivity, moderate fruit consumption is generally well tolerated. For those already dealing with fatty liver or insulin resistance, however, fruit fructose can significantly slow progress toward reversing these conditions. Alcohol and the liver. Alcohol shares with fructose the requirement that it be processed by the liver. No other cells in the body can metabolize alcohol to any significant degree. This places the liver in a position where it must handle the entire alcohol load from any consumed beverage. When alcohol is consumed, the liver prioritizes its metabolism over other fuels. This means that while the liver is processing alcohol, it is not burning fat. Additionally, the products of alcohol metabolism contribute to fat production within the liver. Mixed sugary drinks represent the worst possible combination because they deliver both alcohol and fructose simultaneously. The liver must process both substances, each of which independently contributes to fat accumulation. Some sweet cocktails contain more fructose than alcohol by weight. Beer presents a different but still problematic combination. Beer contains alcohol plus carbohydrates from grains. While these carbohydrates are primarily glucose rather than fructose, they still stimulate insulin release, which further promotes fat storage. Dry wine contains alcohol with minimal residual sugar, making it a less harmful option than sweet mixed drinks or beer, though alcohol itself remains a challenge for the liver. Distilled spirits contain only alcohol with no carbohydrates, meaning they deliver only one substance the liver must process rather than two. Insulin's role in fat storage. Insulin is a hormone released by the pancreas in response to rising blood glucose levels. Its primary job is to move glucose out of the bloodstream and into cells for energy or storage. Insulin is also a potent inhibitor of fat breakdown. When insulin levels are high, the body cannot access stored fat for energy. This is a critical concept for understanding why some individuals struggle to lose belly fat despite restricting calories and exercising. If insulin remains elevated, the fat cells simply will not release their contents to be burned. A diet high in carbohydrates, particularly refined grains and sugars, keeps insulin levels elevated throughout much of the day. Each meal or snack that contains carbohydrates triggers an insulin response. Over time, if insulin levels remain chronically elevated, cells begin to ignore insulin's signal, a condition known as insulin resistance. The relationship between fatty liver and insulin resistance is bidirectional. A fatty liver is an insulin-resistant liver. When the liver is filled with fat, it cannot respond properly to insulin's signal to stop producing glucose. This leads to higher blood sugar levels, which trigger even more insulin release, which drives more fat storage, creating a self-reinforcing cycle. Cortisol and stress. Cortisol is a hormone released by the adrenal glands in response to stress. Its primary functions include raising blood sugar to provide energy for dealing with the perceived threat and breaking down protein to provide raw material for glucose production. In the extreme case of Cushing's disease, where a tumor causes massive cortisol overproduction, affected individuals develop characteristic physical changes, including significant belly fat, a round moon-shaped face, a fatty hump on the upper back, and thin arms and legs with a flat buttocks. This occurs because cortisol drives fat storage in the abdominal area while breaking down protein tissue elsewhere. While most individuals do not have Cushing's disease, chronic stress can create a functional equivalent, though less severe. When stress is continuous, cortisol remains chronically elevated. This raises blood sugar, which triggers insulin release, which promotes fat storage, particularly in the abdominal area. The combination of stress, poor diet, and alcohol creates a perfect storm for belly fat accumulation. Each factor amplifies the effects of the others. The logic of fasting for fat loss. The insulin-fat relationship. The most direct way to access stored fat for energy is to lower insulin levels. When insulin is elevated, fat cells are locked, meaning they cannot release their contents. When insulin drops, the locks open, and fat becomes available to be burned. Fasting is the most effective method for lowering insulin because it completely removes the stimulus for insulin release. Without food intake, blood glucose remains stable or gradually declines, and insulin drops to its lowest levels. This creates the hormonal environment necessary for fat burning. During a fast, the body transitions from using incoming food for energy to using stored energy. Initially, this stored energy comes from glycogen, the storage form of glucose in the liver and muscles. Once glycogen stores are depleted, which typically takes 12 to 24 hours depending on activity level and prior diet, the body begins to rely more heavily on fat for fuel. Human growth hormone and fat burning. Fasting also increases human growth hormone production. Growth hormone has many functions in the body, including maintaining muscle mass, supporting bone density, and promoting fat burning. The increase in growth hormone during a fast helps preserve muscle tissue while accelerating the release and burning of fat stores. This combination of low insulin and high growth hormone creates an ideal metabolic environment for reducing body fat, including the stubborn visceral fat that surrounds the organs. The time factor. The duration of fasting matters for results. Shorter fasts of 12 to 16 hours primarily allow the body to use up glycogen stores and begin the transition to fat burning. Longer fasts of 24 hours or more provide extended periods of low insulin and high growth hormone, during which significant fat burning can occur. The body does not immediately switch from burning sugar to burning fat the moment food intake stops. There is a transition period during which glycogen is used and the metabolic machinery for fat burning is activated. This is why intermittent fasting protocols that include daily fasting periods of at least 16 hours tend to produce more noticeable results than shorter fasting windows. Practical application. 5 steps to reduce belly fat. Step 1. Implement intermittent fasting. Intermittent fasting involves condensing daily food intake into a specific window of time, with fasting occurring during the remaining hours. A common and effective approach is the 16:8 protocol, which means fasting for 16 hours and eating within an 8-hour window. For example, an individual might eat lunch at noon and dinner by 8 p.m., then fast from 8 p.m. until noon the following day. This 16-hour fast includes the overnight hours, making it more manageable than it might initially seem. During the fasting period, only water, plain tea, or black coffee are consumed, as any calories would break the fast and trigger an insulin response. This approach works with the body's natural circadian rhythms and provides a daily period of low insulin during which fat burning can occur. For many individuals, this is a sustainable starting point that can be adjusted as needed. Step 2. Adopt a low-carbohydrate approach. Reducing carbohydrate intake helps keep insulin levels lower throughout the day, making it easier to access fat stores during fasting periods. A low-carbohydrate diet focuses on protein, healthy fats, and non-starchy vegetables while minimizing grains, sugars, and starchy vegetables. When carbohydrates are reduced, the body becomes more efficient at burning fat for fuel. This metabolic adaptation, sometimes called fat adaptation, means that between meals and during fasting, the body can more readily transition to fat burning rather than experiencing energy crashes and cravings for more carbohydrates. For those seeking more pronounced results, a ketogenic diet represents a stricter form of carbohydrate restriction that typically limits carbohydrates to 20 to 50 grams per day. This level of restriction reliably produces ketones, which are molecules produced from fat that can be used for energy by the brain and other tissues. Step 3. Eliminate alcohol. For individuals with fatty liver or significant abdominal fat, eliminating alcohol entirely is the most direct approach. As discussed, alcohol must be processed by the liver and directly contributes to fat accumulation in that organ. While the liver is processing alcohol, it is not burning fat. Even moderate alcohol consumption can slow or stall progress in reducing belly fat. The liver prioritizes alcohol metabolism over other tasks, meaning that fat burning effectively stops until the alcohol is cleared. For someone trying to reverse fatty liver, this interference can be significant. If complete elimination is not realistic, understanding which alcoholic choices are less harmful can help minimize damage. Dry wine contains alcohol with minimal sugar. Distilled spirits contain alcohol alone. Both are preferable to beer or sweet mixed drinks, though neither supports the goal of reducing liver fat. Step 4. Eliminate added sugars and minimize fructose. Added sugars should be completely eliminated when the goal is reducing belly fat. This includes obvious sources like soda, candy, baked goods, and sweetened beverages, as well as less obvious sources like flavored yogurts, bottled sauces, salad dressings, and many packaged foods labeled as healthy. Reading ingredient labels is essential. Sugar appears under many names including sucrose, high fructose corn syrup, cane sugar, cane juice, dextrose, maltose, honey, maple syrup, agave nectar, and fruit juice concentrate. All of these provide fructose that must be processed by the liver. For fruits, moderation and selection matter. Berries are generally lower in sugar than tropical fruits or apples. Vegetables should form the foundation of plant intake, with fruit treated as an occasional addition rather than a dietary staple, particularly for those actively working to reverse fatty liver. Step 5. Address cortisol through stress management. Chronic stress elevates cortisol, which drives abdominal fat storage and makes it harder to lose. Addressing stress is therefore not optional, but essential for those seeking to reduce belly fat. Effective stress management need not be complicated or time-consuming. Simple practices performed consistently yield results. Deep breathing exercises can be done anywhere and require no equipment. The physiological effect of slow, deep breathing is to activate the parasympathetic nervous system, which counteracts the stress response. Meditation, even in short sessions of 5 to 10 minutes daily, has been shown to reduce cortisol levels and improve stress resilience. The key is consistency rather than duration. A few minutes daily produces more benefit than an hour once per month. Gentle movement such as walking, particularly in natural settings, also helps regulate cortisol. The goal is not to exhaust the body, but to move it in ways that feel good and promote relaxation. The role of exercise. What exercise can and cannot do. Conventional wisdom holds that exercise is essential for weight loss, including loss of belly fat. The reality is more nuanced. Exercise alone, without attention to diet and hormones, is unlikely to produce significant reduction in visceral fat. It is possible to be a marathon runner and still have fatty liver. Endurance athletes who consume high carbohydrate diets can maintain significant liver fat despite high energy expenditure. This illustrates that liver fat is driven primarily by what is eaten, not by how many calories are burned. Exercise also does not directly access liver fat. The liver releases fat to be burned by other tissues. But exercise does not specifically target liver fat for release. The hormonal conditions created by fasting and diet are what allow liver fat to be mobilized. Exercise done correctly. When exercise is approached correctly, it can support the goal of reducing belly fat. The key is to avoid exercise that drives up cortisol excessively. High-intensity boot camp-style workouts, extreme endurance efforts, and workouts performed in a depleted state can elevate cortisol to levels that actually work against fat loss. Moderate, consistent movement is more effective for most individuals over 50. Walking is excellent. It improves circulation, uses energy, supports insulin sensitivity, and does not trigger a significant cortisol response. Cycling at a comfortable pace, swimming, yoga, and strength training with moderate weights all provide benefits without excessive stress. The best exercise is one that can be performed consistently without causing injury or burnout. For individuals with significant weight to lose or joint concerns, walking is often the safest and most sustainable starting point. Timing considerations. Exercise performed during a fasted state may enhance fat burning because insulin is already low, making fat more available as fuel. However, this must be balanced with individual tolerance. Some individuals feel weak or lightheaded exercising while fasting and should eat a small meal beforehand. Exercise performed after meals can help blunt the blood sugar and insulin response to that meal. A walk after dinner, for example, can reduce the post-meal glucose spike and the insulin required to manage it. The optimal approach is to experiment and find what feels sustainable. Consistency over time matters more than perfect timing. The timeline for results. What to expect in the first weeks. When implementing these 5 steps, the first noticeable changes are often not on the scale. Many individuals experience a reduction in bloating and digestive discomfort within the first week as the body adjusts to reduced sugar and processed foods. Clothes may feel slightly looser around the midsection even before significant fat loss occurs. The scale may show an initial drop in the first week or 2, much of which is water weight as glycogen stores are depleted and the body releases the water that was stored with glycogen. This is not fat loss, but is a normal and expected part of the transition. The fat loss phase. After the initial adjustment period, fat loss occurs more slowly but steadily. Visceral fat is often the first type of fat to respond to improved metabolic conditions because it is metabolically active and sensitive to hormonal signals. Many individuals notice that their waist measurement decreases before the scale moves significantly. The rate of loss varies considerably based on starting point, consistency, and individual factors. A reasonable expectation is 1 to 2 pounds per week of fat loss, though this may be higher in the beginning for those with more to lose. Plateaus and adjustments. Plateaus are normal and expected. The body adapts to interventions, and what worked initially may become less effective over time. When progress stalls, adjustments can be made. Shortening the eating window from 8 hours to 6 hours can provide a new stimulus. Further reducing carbohydrates, particularly eliminating remaining sources of fructose, can help. Increasing physical activity or changing the type of activity may also restart progress. The key is to view plateaus not as failures, but as signals that the body has adapted and a new approach is needed. Patience and persistence are essential. Common questions and concerns. Is this approach safe for older adults? For generally healthy older adults, intermittent fasting and dietary modification are safe and often beneficial. However, Certain populations should exercise caution or consult healthcare providers before making significant changes. Individuals taking medications for diabetes, particularly insulin or sulfonylureas, are at risk for low blood sugar during fasting and should work with their healthcare provider to adjust medications as needed. Those with a history of eating disorders should approach dietary restriction with caution. Individuals with significant medical conditions should discuss any major dietary changes with their healthcare team. Will muscle mass be lost? Concern about muscle loss is valid, particularly for older adults. However, intermittent fasting combined with adequate protein intake appears to preserve muscle mass better than simple calorie restriction. The increase in human growth hormone during fasting helps maintain muscle tissue. Consuming adequate protein during eating windows is essential. For most individuals, this means including protein with each meal and ensuring total daily protein intake is sufficient for muscle maintenance. For those over 50, protein needs are slightly higher than for younger adults. What about hunger? Hunger during fasting is often worst in the first few days as the body adjusts to a new eating pattern. After this adaptation period, hunger typically diminishes significantly. Many individuals report that hunger is less bothersome on a fasting schedule than it was on a constant eating schedule. Staying hydrated helps manage hunger. Water, herbal tea, and black coffee can all be consumed during fasting periods without breaking the fast. Carbonated water can provide a sense of fullness for some individuals. Hunger also follows a circadian pattern. Most people find that hunger is strongest at the times they are accustomed to eating. After a few days of not eating at those times, the hunger signals diminish. Can this be maintained long-term? The goal is to create a sustainable pattern, not a temporary fix. The 5 steps described can be adapted to fit individual preferences and circumstances. Some may choose to fast 16 hours daily indefinitely. Others may find that a less structured approach works for maintenance after initial goals are achieved. The dietary changes, particularly reducing sugar and processed foods, are consistent with general health recommendations and can be maintained long-term without difficulty. Stress management practices, once established, tend to become valued parts of daily life that individuals continue willingly. Conclusion: belly fat, particularly the visceral fat that surrounds internal organs, is not simply a matter of calories in versus calories out. It is a hormonal condition driven primarily by fructose metabolism in the liver, amplified by insulin resistance and chronic stress. Addressing belly fat requires understanding these mechanisms and working with them rather than against them. Intermittent fasting provides the hormonal environment necessary for fat burning by lowering insulin and increasing growth hormone. A low-carbohydrate diet supports lower insulin levels throughout the day. Eliminating alcohol and added sugars removes the primary drivers of liver fat accumulation. Stress management addresses the cortisol connection. These 5 steps, implemented consistently, address the root causes of belly fat rather than simply treating symptoms. The result is not just a reduction in waist circumference, but improved metabolic health, better energy regulation, and reduced risk for the chronic diseases associated with excess visceral fat. For individuals over 50, this approach offers a sustainable path to better health that works with the body's natural regulatory systems rather than fighting against them through willpower and deprivation. The body wants to be healthy. When given the right conditions and allowed to do what it is designed to do, it will move in that direction naturally. The single most important truth to carry forward is this: belly fat is not asking you to eat less. It is asking you to understand more about how your body was designed to function. When you create the right hormonal conditions, when you remove the substances that overwhelm your liver, when you address the stress that keeps your body in survival mode, the fat that has felt so permanent begins to release naturally. Not because you fought your body, but because you finally worked with it. We would be honored to hear what resonates with you from today's discussion. What questions remain? What insights are emerging? What small shift feels possible now? If you would like to continue exploring this archive of wisdom, we invite you to browse other videos in the Longevity Library and subscribe so that each new recording finds its way to you. This is the Longevity Library. Listen, learn, and live longer.